which was yesterday, of course, bringing Kenya and other partners to celebrate this monumentous occasion. But in terms of those challenges, have the relevant institutions, given that CAG, you do have the mandate and the power to even involve investigative bodies if you see there is malice, they have not handed in the information, and also talk to us about the penalties of an institution refusing to pay, to give out those information.
Yes, that's a very good question. Actually, we are speaking to the enforcement mechanisms that are in the Act. So we have two types of institutions that we deal with in terms of access to information. We have the private institutions and we have the public institutions. So access to information, or rather the Ombudsman, is a very unique public institution that covers or governs both the public and the private institutions. So how does it deal with it? In the public institutions, obviously because they're accountable to the people, then the Ombudsman would always step in. Private institutions, it's because they also hold data that is personal to our people. So you find banks have your personal information, you'll have insurance companies that have your personal information, and generally employers have your personal information. So when you feel that some of your rights have been infringed by these private entities and you request for that information and they fail to give it to you, you can always come to the Commission and we will step in and you will file a review and we'll step in to see that how that information can be given. Now, those two institutions, we have enforced it in two ways when they fail to give you that information. For the public institutions, we've given orders where we've said, if you don't give this information within 21 days, we'll proceed to have the Director of Public Prosecution have you prosecuted for having committed an offense, because it's actually an offense if you fail to release information belonging to somebody who is seeking it. Then for private institutions, we have gone ahead to issue financial fines and penalties, that if you fail to give out this information, and I did this for a certain bank, we are charging 10,000 a day until that information is released. And we have seen that it works, because for one of the banks that I have mentioned, after giving that order within 48 hours, we had the information with us and proceeded to release it to the concerned Kenyan, and he proceeded to exercise his rights. Yes.
That is very interesting. Now, given that you also lead that very vital department which is charged with access to information, in terms of the cases you receive on a daily basis, if you do have the statistics, just tell us how many they are, and how do you go about it until that particular Kenyan is able to get the information they required?
So because of the awareness challenge that we are having, we are not getting as many applications as we would want to. But what I know for a fact is that over 280,000 public institutions, both public and private institutions, have managed to receive access to information requests. So that's where it starts. You must start that process by visiting the institution that has the information. If that institution does not give you that information within 21 days, you now come to the Commission by way of review, reviewing the decision of that institution to fail to give you that decision. That information, sorry. So if they don't give you that information, you come to us within 21 days, and you must do so before the lapse of 30 days from the date they failed to do so. When you come to us, you can always write an email to the complaint@ombudsman.go.ke. You can visit our offices, which are located in Westlands, West and Towers in Nairobi. We are also in 8 regions. We are in Makueni, Kisumu, Mombasa, Isiolo, Garissa, Eldoret, and I think Nyahururu and Meru. So those are the areas we're in. We have offices in those regions. You can just go in and request for information from the officers who are there. Then you can also visit our Huduma centers. We are in 8 Huduma centers where we have CAG officers who have a desk and are willing to receive information such as those requests there. Then we are in 22 Huduma desks where we are sharing those services with other public institutions. So you can just visit any officer within the Huduma regions that have the officers who are assigned to CAG activities, and they'll assist you to know how to place that request for information. So what happens immediately we receive that request is that we will send out a request for information to the institution that has it and ask them to respond within 7 days. If they don't respond within 7 days, it will lead to either summons or an order that if you do not release this information with this number of days, then what will follow thereafter is we will recommend you be arrested or prosecuted, or a fine will be issued against you. So it's a very short process because of the obvious reason that when you're requesting for information, it's a very tight, time-bound process. So the earlier you get the information, the better it is for you. And the longer it delays in giving you the information, the more useless it will end up being by the time you're getting the information. So that essentially is a process. Then after the information is given or the order is given against the institution, then the person who requested for that information, whom we usually refer to as the applicant when they come to the ombudsman, they can always go to the High Court to enforce it. So when they go to the High Court to enforce it, then the consequences that you'll find contempt proceedings also following after that, or you have this person summoned in court and issues like that. So that is the process.
But you see, there is a problem here. We do have an act that guides access to information. Why has it been so hard in implementing it?
Well, it's been hard to implement it because of various reasons. Because as I've mentioned, first of all, is the awareness issue. That even though we have the proper legislation that is there that shows how institutions are supposed to process and give out this information, the Kenyan people they've not managed to exercise that right as effectively as you could imagine. So, and then the other issue is that we're also having capacity building issues with touching on some of our public officers, but the Ombudsman is working very hard to ensure that most of our public officers are aware of the process in which information is supposed to be released to the Kenyan people. But also because it's also a new area of law, I must say, because I've also noticed some of our advocates are not familiar with the process. And if you see advocates are having challenges with how to request for information, then generally the Kenyan people also would not be well versed with how to address it. But the new team that has joined the commission, that is myself and our chair, Charles Dulo, together with my fellow commissioner, Honorable Kanyi Njagwa, one of the things we have agreed to do is that during our tenure, we will really push for Kenyans to understand how to use this right. Because this right will enable Kenyans to exercise their civic duty to engage with the government with the right information. Because the failure to have the right information, or any information for that matter, creates a room for disinformation and misinformation. And therefore you'll find Kenyans discussing issues that actually don't exist, or debating about matters that do not exist within the public sector. And conversely, on the other side, we also are pushing the public officers to give out this information so that we can have debates that are grounded with the correct facts. Because their failure to release this information also creates a room for mystery and opaqueness, and when that happens, there's a lot of mistrust between the Kenyan people and the government. So if we could bridge this gap, then it would be a benefit for both the government, where they'll have the trust issues embedded within the Kenyan people, and for the Kenyan people to know what their government is doing. So it's important for both sides to understand how they can exercise and utilize this right.
And it's very interesting you're talking about in terms of that mistrust that is there between the governed and the people who are ruling them.
Correct.
In terms of boosting that through this access to information and ensure that there's transparency and governance, what needs to be done to ensure that next time we do not see what happened in the country last year and early this year?
What needs to be done is that public institutions and public officers who are charged with the responsibility of holding these offices on behalf of the Kenyan people need to release that information. It's unfortunate that some institutions that I do not wish to mention have received our requests for information and just sit on them. They don't respond. And their failure to respond creates a lot of, questions on their part as to whether they are serving Kenyans in good faith. So the ball actually will fall on those leaders who have been charged with the responsibility of serving Kenyans in a manner that is considered transparent and accountable. I am grateful to institutions and people who have always requested for information for purposes of knowing what the government is doing and actually publishing that information for everyone else to understand what the government is doing. Because those ones are the ones who are actually giving the correct picture of the things as they are on the ground. But you will see quite a few officers within the government are reluctant to give out this information for reasons that are known to them. But for us, we do not understand why they would hold back information that we also consider not to be limited, because I want to take you back a bit. Under the Access to Information law, not every information is to be released to the public for obvious reasons. And I had mentioned yesterday, some of them would touch on the security of the country as a whole. Some of it would also affect our economy. So you do not release certain information to the public because it will pose a threat to our stability as a Kenyan people. But there's information touching on programs and activities that you're conducting as a government institution. It is important that you relay that information as quickly as possible, especially if you get a request for information coming from the Ombudsman's office, because you see, the Ombudsman's office is a bridge between the Kenyan people and these public institutions. And the more you give out this information, the more the Kenyan people will have trust in your leadership. So the ball is really on their court as the leaders who are serving us in this country.
And to build trust in the Ombudsman's office, why not name and shame those institutions that are not allowing your office or Kenyans as well to access those information?
Actually, we do. We do. If you followed our social media platforms, which is where we always publish the orders that we've given. Like most recently, it was against the Mandera County. We issued an order against them. We're about to also issue an order against a very senior public institution and public officer, for that matter, for failure to respond to our request for information. There's also the issue we had with the Judicial Service the other day, which was also arising on the issue of failure to release information surrounding investigations and hearings around discipline of judges and magistrates. And we are still having conversations around that with the Judicial Service Commission, and I hope we will be able to finalize that issue, because it will also be important for institutions and constitutional commissions, for that matter, to also look like they are accountable to the Kenyan people. And that's why they need to keep on giving out this information every time there's a request for this information. We also had the issue with the pensions department, where we asked them to give us a report on how far they have gone in resolving a lot of complaints that we had received against them. And I'm pleased to note that quite a number of the complaints have been addressed and pension payments made. We'll just look at a few issues where we are still trying to get in touch with our complainants, because that's also another issue that we also face on the other end in terms of the Ombudsman's office. Some of our complainants, unfortunately, seem to have passed on before receiving their pension. And that is one of the challenges that we have with failure by government institutions to respond to us with the immediate response that we need, so as to get in touch with the Kenyan people. But essentially, we are trying the best that we can, and we are also trying to see how we can partner with other institutions to create an environment of openness. And there's a program that is currently running in the country. I don't know whether you're aware of it. It's called the Open Governance Partnership, where the Ombudsman is part of it, whereby we will assess the state of openness of all public institutions. This is an activity we are going to carry out with the Ombudsman's office and in support of some of the donor partners that we have around. And we'll come up with a report that will show how open are institutions in as far as giving out information. And it will not be limited to the government institutions alone. I've mentioned we'll also look at some of the private institutions. And then we will definitely try and see who is going to go in that list, so that we can show them where they need to improve and what they need to do to make themselves more transparent and accountable to the Kenyan people. Yes. And
going back to our initial conversations that we're having, in terms of the current era we're in a digital era. We're battling, you said, misinformation, disinformation. So in terms of ensuring we bridge the gap of access to information that does not misinform the public on social media, what steps have you taken to ensure that doesn't happen?
It's a very good question. In fact, it is one of the issues that we were discussing with the chief guest yesterday, who was the the principal secretary in the ICT and Digital Economy Department of the Ministry of ICT. And one of the things that we agreed on is that the Ombudsman currently is championing for the digitization of all public records, because it's one thing to request for information and then it's another to have that information availed to you. So we have noted in some instances some information is not available for release because records have been destroyed over time, things have gotten lost and things like that, because there was a period where we had the analog way of releasing information and those records seem not to be available. But with the digitization of records, it will ensure that we are able, as the Kenyan people, to access this information in a digital format. So that is one of the things that we are working with the ministry to ensure that all public records are available for use in a digital format by the Kenyan people. The ministry has informed us that they have digitized their services, which is fantastic, but without records, then the services are merely available for use, but will not give so much, streamline the entire process of accessing information. So you may have the services, which is fantastic, but you also need to work hand in hand with the digitization of the records. Because, for instance, you'll be trying to apply or renew for your passport, which is still in the analog format. And when you're renewing it, they need to look at the history of your passport application. So you need your records to have been digitized from the very first day that you had applied for it, so that there's that ease of processing the renewal of your passport. So that's what we are talking about, that once these services have been automated, fantastic, can we have the records also digitized so that it's very easy to access and process all these services together. Then the ministry has also given us an assurance that they're going to develop AI tools that will enable the Kenyan people to access information that will have been digitized. So with these AI tools, Kenyans will be able to have a concrete discussion based on information that is correct, digitized, and ready to use. So those are some of the things that we are putting in place to ensure access to information is a lived reality and a conversation that will be had on a very good environment, because you have the correct information with you, it is readily and easily available and accessible, and it's information that is within your fingertips. So that's one of the things that we are working with together with the ministry.
But we've seen also the down effects of using AI and social media in terms of putting all our information there and then it is misused. Is there no fear of that?
So now the data protection will also come into hand. I think that's what you're trying to also address, because now it means that your personal data would also now be subjected to third parties. You will note that yesterday's event, we also had the Commissioner on Data Protection present, because we have to work hand in hand. When this information is also being digitized, then there needs to be certain mechanisms that are put in place to ensure personal data is not accessible to third parties. So the AI tools that will be generated will take into account all these issues, also taking into account the limitations that I've mentioned under the access to information law, so that not all type of information is accessible to the Kenyan people without, ensuring that you protect information that is very much secure for the Kenyan people. So all those things are going to be taken into account. I do not see the fear for that particular issue, because for me, what I look at when they're talking about digitization of records and all this information is basically on what we usually call proactive disclosure of information. So proactive disclosure of information is information that does not need the Kenyan people to prompt you as the institution that has that information. You should proactively disclose it, because this is information that you need the public to consume, so that they have confidence in what you're doing as a government institution. So you'll find a lot of proactive disclosure information is already appearing in websites of different public institutions. You'll see their minutes for their annual general meeting, you'll see their financial statements, you'll see their budgets, you'll also see Hansard for county assemblies, you'll also see a lot of their history in terms of the structure of the organization. That is proactive disclosure of information, which we are saying should be readily and easily available for the Kenyan people to consume and to also, learn how to use it and take it to the next level in terms of exercising their rights under the Constitution.
And also, not only being a government representative in that particular institution, but you've seen the current population that you're dealing with. It is informed, it is tech savvy. So in terms of ensuring that you bridge that gap, not only by trust, by working hand in hand with them, because you see majority of them are unemployed and they do have the skills. So in terms of boosting their morale through the current innovative function you were talking about that you will carry out in terms of governance and openness. So in terms of involving the youth in such kind of initiatives, what has the Ombudsman Office done?
Well, the Ombudsman's Office is not really government. We are an independent constitutional commission. So we work with the government, but at the same time we regulate their activities. And we also work together with a lot of the civil society organizations. And you noted yesterday we were with one of our very key partners, which is Katiba Institute. And we have quite a number of community-based organizations that we work with that support our activities in the Ombudsman's Office. And we also had a walk that happened on Saturday, which had a lot of youth. I would say the Gen Zs were in plenty. And they came in together to celebrate the International Day on Universal Access to Information with us. Together with Transparency International, we have quite a number of, NGOs that we work with, and our doors are always open to them. So together with the youth, we've always worked with them this journey, and a majority, I would say, of our clients are actually in that sector. And we have worked with them to try and ensure that most of the articles of the Constitution that are within the mandate of the Commission are promoted and enforced. So we continue to work with them.
Also, yesterday you talked passionately about whistleblowers. We do know how integral they have been, not only to the various institutions they work under, but for the country at large, where they see corruption, they see misuse of power. So in terms of ensuring that we have reinforced whistleblowers so that we can motivate many others to come out, of course, secretly, to tell us what is not happening in those institutions. So what were you calling for? Is there no protection for these whistleblowers, or there is need for people to know who whistleblowers are?
So I would not speak to whether there's a protection or not, but because there's a witness protection agency that is there, and they are best placed to tell us how that is going on for them. But there's a whistleblower bill that is to structure the whole process of protecting whistleblowers. So with the whistleblower bill, if it is passed and made into law, the Commission on Administrative Justice is mandated to receive the information from the whistleblower under that proposed bill, and then after that they will send the whistleblowers to the protection agency, because obviously we would not have the capacity to do that. But the intention of me speaking to it is that there is need to have a structure of protecting whistleblowers, because if we don't do so, we end up not having these whistleblowers coming out to give us this information for purposes of us as the Ombudsman to investigate them. There's a fear that if I come out to speak, then my life is at risk, my family is at risk, and my job is at risk. So by passing the whistleblowers bill, it will mean that there's more confidence in an institution that will ensure this person's identity is protected from the day they come with the information until the matter is investigated and resolved. So essentially what we are pushing for is for a structured way of protecting the whistleblowers. If we put those structures in place by way of legislation, then whistleblowers will feel at ease to come to the Ombudsman's Office and give us the information that we will need for purposes of, promoting articles of the Constitution on administrative justice as well as access to information.
And of course, if you're just joining us, we're conversing matters to do with the International Day of Universal Access to Information. Talk to us on our social media platforms in terms of, have you received those informations when you have visited those public institutions? Talk to us on our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1. Of course, I'll be sampling some of your views and comments to the Vice Chancellor. Of course, this Vice Chair, apologies for that. Okay. Of course, this year's commemoration of the International Day of Universal Access to Information reinforced the need for both government entities and private sector to embrace the openness bridge the communication divide amid increasing demand for information. So Vice Chair, in terms of the successes that you have had in terms of implementing Access to Information Act, what are some of the successes you have had and what are some of the failures you have undergone as well?
Well, in terms of the success stories, obviously, because we have managed to process 93% of the requests for information, that's one of the successes we have had. We have also managed to double the requests for information. This year alone, last year alone, we had over 200 requests by the end of the financial year. But this year we are not yet half the financial year and we're already at 400 requests. So we are happy that a lot of Kenyans are now understanding how to request for information. So that means we're also moving forward in terms of building capacity and awareness within the Kenyan people. Another success story that I must mention is what I am talking. We had just mentioned on the State of Openness report, because that's one of the things that we have managed to get partners to develop the tools. And as I have told you, in the near future, we'll have the very first State of Openness report. So it's one of the things that we are very proud of in matters access to information, that we'll be able to showcase to the Kenyan people how open is your government, and we'll be able to also point out areas that need refinement and which institutions need a lot of support. In terms of the challenges, obviously we have the challenge, as you mentioned, of the whistleblower bill. A lot of whistleblowers, I would say, would want to come to the Ombudsman's office, but the protection is not there in terms of structure, in terms of the gap in legislation. So that's one of the challenges that we have. We have a challenge, the big challenge is on awareness. Many Kenyans still don't understand how to request for information and what are the benefits of having this information, and how do I access information when it is denied, and how do I access the Ombudsman's office. So that's also another challenge that we're having, but slowly by slowly we'll be able to deal with it. Then last but not least, we also have issues of capacity building within the government circles. We still have officers who do not understand and appreciate the value of releasing information to the Kenyan people. And I think with time, after these continued discussions around this conversation, they will appreciate the need to disclose this information proactively, so that you don't find yourselves always on the receiving end. And I do not want to mention one of the institutions, but I would tell you, as we were doing our visits across the country, we got to understand a lot of information is within the hospitals about SHA. Both the private and the public hospitals have a lot of information about SHA, together with the challenges and the advantages. But unfortunately, I do not think that we speak of the advantages of SHA as often as we should. And I think, unfortunately, the institution also charged with that responsibility of giving out this information to the Kenyan people is not coming out as strong as it should. And we have also received a lot of requests for information to SHA, and we hope that they will respond to us so that that information can be relayed to the Kenyan people, so that they would understand what is going on within their institution, and then we just continue tightening and closing any loopholes where would feel issues of corruption, maladministration are for purposes of the Kenyan people enjoying the services that they are entitled to. Those are some of the challenges and the gains that I can mention on matters access to information.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair. But we're also talking about issues that you've just talked about in terms of the Social Health Authority. Maybe let me prick your mind. I don't know if you want to say much, but let me prick your mind on that. Given that you've clearly stated that many Kenyans are asking those institutions that are tasked to tell people how SHA works, where does it work and where it doesn't work. But we even heard from the Principal Secretary of Public Health, that is Mary Muthoni, clearly stating that you cannot go to the level higher hospitals without first passing through the first stage of the hospital, so that you can go to the second all the way to level 4. So in terms of bridging that particular gap and ensuring not only the workers who work in those particular institutions, but the government institutions in the health ministry are supposed to tell those institutions to inform the Kenyans reliably, so that they do not have a misinformation about SHA. So what are you looking to do about it? Because you clearly stated that you visited them and you're currently assessing them. So what are kind of recommendations, in short, that I'm asking, you will be giving?
I don't want to jump the gun, but yes, we did visit quite a number of institutions, and we got a lot of information on the issues that are bedeviling the SHA in terms of both the public hospitals and the private hospitals. I don't want to jump the gun because we have not yet released our report, so probably you will give us that time to finish so that we can give our recommendations based on what we saw on the ground and based on the feedback that we got from both the Kenyan people who are visiting these hospitals, and they have actually enjoyed the services that they have gotten from these hospitals, as well as the Kenyan people who are not quite happy with the services that they have received, and those who are not happy because these monies are also being deducted from their salaries. So they're not. So it's really a whole chain of happy Kenyans and disgruntled Kenyans, and you need to sit down and see how best you can create a mutual playing field or ground for them, so that all Kenyans in general will be happy at the end of the day with what SHA provides. So for now, I can't give you our view as a commission because we have not sat down to finalize the report, but I can assure you we are taking into consideration all these views, right from the person whose salary is being deducted so as to, ensure SHA is a success, and all the way to the final consumer of the services and the one who has not consumed the services. We'll give you the views that we have received from the Kenyan people who we commonly refer to as wanyonge in the society, yes.
Okay, and of course another major issue you clearly mentioned is corruption in this country. We know a menace that it has been not only to the institutions but to the country at large, and whatever we are missing economically. What are Kenyans, our wanyonge? What are they telling you about this corruption?
Well, the corruption discussion is a whole day discussion that you need to have. But I can tell you the Commission on Administrative Justice is also receiving a lot of complaints from the Kenyan people on corruption cutting across all institutions. But obviously, primarily, the judiciary is one of them, and the police is one of them. And the challenges that we are having is that without some structure where we can protect whistleblowers, it's merely impossible for the Commission to investigate some of these allegations. But what I can tell you is that one of the tools that we feel as a Commission will be critical in trying to address matters corruption is access to information, because access to information will be the enabler of an environment where transparency and accountability thrives. Because if institutions will strive to create an environment of openness where they are ready to showcase that they have nothing to hide to the Kenyan people, then more often than not you will realize some of the allegations on corruptions actually does not exist or doesn't hold water. The only reason you'll find Kenyans rushing to use the word corruption is probably because they don't have that information. And when they request for that information, there's reluctance to release that information. So if you're reluctant to release that information, the obvious conclusion from the Kenyan people is that you have done something with our money and therefore you don't want to give us that information. And generally, I think we need to really look at how access to information should be put in place and promoted so that the Kenyan people will be satisfied and trust the institutions charged with the responsibility of performing some of their functions and services for their benefit. And one of the ways of doing that is just giving out that information without even being prompted, just say these are the number of people I am having a disciplinary issue with, I'm investigating these allegations, and this is my conclusion, I have acquitted this one or I have convicted this one. Or if it's an institution that is charged with the responsibility of managing finances, you only need to do is just post your budgets in your website and just show how you have managed those budgets and expended, and show your financial statements, and the Kenyan people will be satisfied with how you're running your activities as an institution. And eventually you'll see the conversation moving from the allegations of corruption to something else that is not really on maladministration. Yes.
And maybe let me rephrase that question. Do they feel that the relevant institutions, the institutions like the EACC, other units of investigative bodies that are mandated to investigate these corruptions that were been witnessed in those institutions, so as Kenyans, do they feel that these institutions are working for them?
I do not want to speak for these institutions because they are the ones who would get the feedback on whether they feel the Kenyan people are happy with their services. I think it would be unfair for me to speak on behalf of a sister commission that is also charged with the mandate of ensuring that matters corruption is dealt with. I think it would be fair for them to come and speak as to what they are receiving as the feedback. But I can tell you the conversation is really a lot on governance issues. I think it's still the same conversation we've been having since the June 26th, 25th issue. And what we are trying to do is to change the conversation by introducing new issues and trying to convince institutions that are charged with the responsibility of offering services to the Kenyan people to come out more openly and more aggressively by giving Kenyans the right information so that the conversation can change. But obviously, yes, those are conversations and discussions that are still out there. The magnitude of trust, whether these institutions are doing the right thing or not, I don't think I can be able to answer that. Yeah. And
of course, you clearly stated that you visit many institutions, both at the national and county level. You know, Kenya, everything is political. So in terms of goodwill, is there good political will for the Office of the Ombudsman when they come to the national government and ask for materials or any information they want to continue with the investigations, you are given, as well as the county?
Yes, in terms of the Ombudsman's office, for us there's no political influence at all. I mean, we are, as I've told you, an independent commission, and I have not experienced any political push or resistance. In fact, we have received a lot of support from institutions where we have asked them to disclose information. Though there are some institutions that do not disclose information for their own reasons, and I think after some time, including after watching this interview, maybe they would think twice about it. But generally, we've received a lot of response in terms of the Ombudsman's office and a lot of support in as far as the public institutions are concerned. I would also say that we have received a lot of overwhelming support from the Kenyan people and wananchi who have continuously come to the Ombudsman's office. Especially this year, we have a very high traffic of complaints. I think it's because the way we have come out to show that, hey, we are still here, we're still fighting for your rights. And I'm happy to say that the Kenyan people are having trust with the Ombudsman's office, and they're still visiting us, asking questions, and we are pushing to support and to protect what is entitled to them, and we will not stop at that. I think you asked me a second question on where do we want to go as the Ombudsman's office? For us, I think we want to move to the digital age, I think, which is also the theme that was mentioned there. And one of the things that we have said we are also going to come up with is, with the grace of God, try to be in all the 47 counties so that the Kenyan Mwananchi is available to all the counties, and then work with the counties, as you have said. There's a big challenge with the counties in terms of awareness. They are not as how would I pull it, as alert as the national government, I think, based on the fact that they came in after the 2010 constitution. But a lot of programs within the Ombudsman's office is also centered in building capacity within the county governments. I had mentioned that there's a program called Flocker that is running across all the counties in Kenya, and we are getting a lot of resistance in releasing information from some of the county governments. So when going back to visit them, we'll try to tell them the importance of releasing this information for the benefit of the Kenyan people. But generally, counties are trying. There's some counties that are trying. There's some counties that are really holding back, and we are having big challenges with them. But hopefully the tide will change, and the thinking of, serikali ni sirikali is going to change, so that you stop holding back information thinking that the secrets you have are not supposed to be, consumed, because not everything is a secret. What you think is a secret could actually be for your benefit if you gave it out to the Kenyan people to understand, appreciate, consume, and engage you at a point of information and knowledge. Yes.
And maybe going forward, not only as an institution, but as a country, where do you think we're headed in terms of ensuring that there is service delivery? Because every Kenyan is just yearning for service delivery, not only from institutions that are tasked to do so, but from the country at large. So in terms of ensuring that the Office of Ombudsman has boosted this, what would your say be?
My say would be I'm really positive. I feel like where we are headed as a country, things are about to change. You can already see a lot of change when it comes to the service delivery, where they've automated over 22,000 services. So I feel like there's a lot of hope for the Kenyan people to access services that are efficient and effective, and services that will also be provided to the Kenyan people that will enable them enjoy their rights under the Constitution. So there's a lot of hope. Do I feel like there's a goodwill? There's goodwill to ensure that the Kenyan people enjoy these services, because I have seen the Ombudsman's office is not receiving a lot of resistance, or we are not receiving a lot of pushback when we request for information or when we are investigating agencies. We see a bit of some officers who are not willing to support the requests from the Ombudsman. Some don't even want to be investigated when their services are questioned. But there's a change. There's a change, and I think with time, most of these institutions will see the benefit of working with the Ombudsman's office, because we are not there to, you know, out of malice or we are busybodies. No, no, no. We are there to actually support you by ensuring your services are delivered to the Kenyan people in an efficient manner. So I feel like there's hope. There's hope for the Kenyan people, because the Kenyan people are also very educated. They understand and know what they are supposed to receive in terms of service delivery. And therefore, the big challenge is on those who are delivering those services. Are you aware that you are dealing with a population that understands what they're supposed to get? So once you get to know that this Kenyan populace understands the services that they're supposed to receive, then there'll be a change of tone in how you deliver those services to the Kenyan people. So I'm very hopeful.
And what are certain key recommendations, if they implemented it, can improve access to information? What key recommendations have you made as a body?
So what we have made as a body, first of all, is to the county governments. They are required under their laws to pass the County Governments Act. They're required to pass the Access to Information law. They are supposed to domesticate that law within the counties. And you domesticate that law so as to suit your needs as a county. You'll find counties have unique needs. Like for Homa Bay, they already have a process of requesting for information. Fishermen have a free toll line where they call to request for what will be the climatic conditions for the next day for purposes of fishing. So you incorporate that in law so as your residents and the people within that county will know how to process requests for information. So in some counties, we have also supported them in coming up with this law, and we have that model law which we are able to send out to the counties for purposes of them coming up with the law that will be suitable to them. Some counties will obviously bring in different languages to be used in terms of requesting for information. You'll have different modes of requesting for information. So those counties on their own know what they need to do as far as access to information. But there's a challenge there. Only 2 counties have passed the Access to Information law, and that is Kwale and Makueni. 3 counties, sorry, as well as Bungoma. They've also passed the Access to Information law. So we applaud the 3 counties. But 3 out of 47, not so good. Take into account we don't have big cities that have passed the law. So that's also a challenge on the big cities. What's happening? Where are you with the Access to Information law? So that's one area. Secondly, to the public institutions, capacity building. We still need to do a lot of capacity building with your officers. They still do not understand how to process information requests. At the same time, come up with the mechanisms of how you can digitize requests for information, and whether have you appointed access to information officers. Those are some of the things that you need to put in place as public institutions. And lastly, proactive disclosure of information. All these government institutions need to proactively disclose information. We have not seen that happening. Some of these institutions, we've been forced to summon them to come to the Ombudsman's office to explain why they're not proactively disclosing some things such as financial statements or budgets, or even just showing how many people have you given contracts within this financial year. they are not publishing that information in their website, which is something they need to do so that they show that they are open to the Kenyan people. Those are some of the highlights that I can talk about. And lastly, when we come to your offices for purposes of collecting data, please receive us. Yes.
And not combat you. But
and not combat us or chase us.
Okay, maybe given that we are entering the final leg of our conversation, now give us your final remarks. And in terms of, is there an opportunity, a job opportunity with this particular sector when it comes to access to information? You do know the unemployment has been a major issue. And given that you're dealing with generations that are tech savvy, innovative and educated, why not use them? As give us your final remarks.
We would love to use them, but unfortunately we are not the ministry that is charged with the responsibility of digitizing the records that I have mentioned. The responsibility at the end of the day lies with the ministry or the government of the day that is charged with the responsibility of ensuring some of these services are in the digital form. Ours is to regulate how these services are delivered, and what we have noted is that there is a challenge in as far as digitization of records. So probably that challenge will be thrown to the Ministry of ICT to create an environment where the young people can access job opportunities to ensure that they're given an opportunity to come. And I think the Ministry of Lands had an opportunity to get in a lot of the young people. I don't remember whether they had used some university at some point to scan all the land records, but now this is on a bigger scale. So maybe there's a greater opportunity for the Ministry of ICT to, bring in a lot of the young generation who are tech savvy so as to help in the digitization framework. But generally, as the Ombudsman's office, our doors are open. We are, in as far as employment is concerned, limited to the very small budget that is allocated to us by the national government. Unfortunately, we are not able to run big projects such as those, and that's why I'm throwing it back to the ministry, because then that's their primary goal. Ours is to regulate the service delivery through enforcing administrative justice and promoting access to information.
Okay, thank you so much. She is the Vice Chairperson at the Commission on Administrative Justice, CAJ, and a Commissioner in charge of access of information at the Ombudsman Office. That is Dorothy Jamatoro Kimengich. Thank you so much for making time for us. And of course, as and when we get that particular report, kindly avail it to us so that we can invite you back and ask you the findings when it comes to the openness in governance matters report that you will be launching.
Thank you for having me, Abdi.
Okay, and that has been the Ombudsman Office, and of course you have seen them in various offices, not only the judiciary but in the national government offices, of course, taking charge to many issues that they have brought forth before you. And we're also closely keeping eye on various events that are currently happening right now. And I'm being informed that the case when it comes to the seeking to suspend the nationwide police recruitment exercise that is slated for Friday is currently on. That is Justice Lawrence Mugambi is overseeing that particular case. Ruth Wamboi is following on that particular story. We also do have the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry currently meeting with editors from various media houses in preparation for the commemoration of Mazingira Day that will be marked on the 10th of October 2025. Yusufara is following on that particular story. The launch of the Africa Skills for Jobs Policy Academy program, Wahungu, that is Joseph Wahungu, is following on that particular story. We also do have, there is a second workshop on biopesticide policy event that is currently underway at the Safari Park Hotel. Also various parliamentary committees. We want to go to one of the events as and when we take this short commercial break, and then we'll be bringing up those events. But in the second hour, we'll be focusing on matters to do with the pharmacy. Don't go too far.
Nimepotea njia and I don't know where I am.
Chaka, it's fast and short.
Nisikie sauti. Unaweza jilala. Kwetu mtoto wako wako wapi?
Sasa hii stress inatoka wapi?
Haki huyu mlevi asikuja hapa na makelele zake.
Mbona kuna makelele huko nje?
Msichana wetu amerudi.
Sisi ndio tunafaa kuja kuulizia maendeleo ya kesi ya mtoto wetu ama ni wewe?
The world of governance is vast and can be alien to the ordinary man on the street.
Critical issues are going to be discussed.
From white papers to policy positions, it is easier to get lost in the labyrinth of words.
Inside Government takes you to key global metropolis where critical decisions are made and where policies are crafted.
We interview policymakers and senior government officials to highlight and enumerate government policies and projects. We take a deep dive into the underbelly of complex red tape to demystify policies across the country, across the world. Join me, O'Brien Kimani, on Inside Government, only on KBC Channel 1.
It's art, it's culture.
You can see with me I have this handkerchief. And is it really a handkerchief or is it?
My name is Kevin Kasioki. Please join me each and every Friday at 8 p.m. only on KBC Channel 1.
Greetings in the name of the Most High, Jah Rastafari. My good name is Marley Moses, the positive warrior, alongside...
Yes, sir, DJ D-Rage, the baddest, each and every Wednesday from 10 p.m. on KBC Channel 1 TV.
Tunakuletea the biggest reggae party in 254 in a yard extra. Extra niceness of reggae music.
Extra dose of entertainment.
When the thing is nice,
we have to do it twice.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now in the second hour, our keen focus will be on the World Pharmacy Day that was marked on the 25th of September 2025 with the theme of this year being Think Health Pharmacist. And of course we'll be focusing on that, but also being informed that the former Rongo Member of Parliament that is Dalmas Otieno Requiem Mass is currently ongoing at the Don Bosco Church, Upper Hill. Let's get to hear more from that particular service.
In unity. He was a source of guidance and inspiration to his children and extended family. Despite his many responsibilities, he always prioritized the welfare of his loved ones. My father's political career, his life was one of vision, service, and dedication to his people. From the earliest days of his career, he carried an unshakable belief that leadership meant transforming lives, not merely holding the office. His remarkable professional journey began with his employment at the Alico Agency, American Life Insurance Company, where he became the global winner of the 1973 international contest that saw him and my mother tour the whole of Europe and South America. In 1977, he was admitted as the associate of the Chartered Insurance Institute in London, and within 2 years, he rose to become a fellow of the Institute, a mark of excellence earned through rigorous examination. In 1983, he was a chartered insurance practitioner, widely respected for mentoring young professionals and for his thought leadership at the Kenya Insurance Training Institute. In the private sector, he proved to be a trailblazer. From 71 to 82 as an agency manager of Alico, Kenya, he oversaw insurance branches across Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, and Nyeri, commanding the largest agency force in Kenya with over 100 agents. In 77, his name shone globally when he was declared the $1 million agency manager worldwide in the American Life Insurance Company. He later founded Thabiti Finance Company Limited in 1983, serving as its chairman and CEO, while also sitting on the boards of Kenya Commercial Bank and Kenya National Assurance Company. But it was his public service that his name became a household name. He joined Kenyatta University Council as the treasurer in 1983, before plunging fully into politics in 1988, when he was elected member of parliament for Rongo constituency. At only 43 years of age, he became the youngest member of the cabinet when he was appointed Minister for Industry. It is during his tenure as Minister for Industry that he published his first book, Turning the Wheels of Industry, which had a foreword from the late President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. Later, he served as Minister for Manpower, Planning and Employment, and also as Minister for Transport and Communication. In the mid-1900s, his leadership was recognized continentally when he chaired the African Ministers' Transport and Communications. His political journey was intertwined with Kenya's democratic transition. He co-chaired the inter-party parliamentary group that negotiated key electoral reforms ahead of the 1977 elections. And at the historic Bomas Constitution Conference, he co-chaired the executive committee which introduced the proposal of the office of the Prime Minister, one of the most significant constitutional innovations of the time. He was deeply involved in the Orange Movement of 2005 that rejected the Wako draft constitution and later played a central role in the Coalition of Reforms and Democracy, CORD, co-chairing its summit ahead of the 2013 elections. My father's service was not confined to politics alone. His greatest pride lay in his transformative contributions to Rongo constituency and the wider Nyanza region. Education was always a priority. Between 1988 and 1997, he personally sponsored more than 400 plus students to pursue higher education. Among them, Dr. Owiyo, Dr. Maurice Ligusi, and Senior Principal Richard Odongo. He initiated and supported institutions such as Rongo University, Siala Technical Training Institute, Miari Agricultural Training Center, Awendo Center of Excellence, Kangeso Boys High School, Kwe Primary, Ongora Primary, and Nyakuru Primary. In 2000, when students with B grades were locked out of Joint Admissions Board placements, he launched a university sponsorship program and funded more than 537 students, ensuring they achieved their dreams. This single vision of empowerment through education lifted countless families out of poverty. He also believed in economic empowerment, which was a true foundation of freedom. In the 1900s, he founded the Rongo Dairy Cooperative Society, providing women groups with modern dairy cattle breeds, and the Koyo Shelter Afrique Women Group. He championed fish farming after the 2000 elections, establishing local fish ponds for youth groups and building the expansive Opapo fish processing plant. For trade, he spearheaded the construction of Rongo Awendo modern markets long before devolution was established, and lobbied successfully for the first bank branch in Rongo Town, a Kenya Commercial Bank outlet, in 2009. The infrastructure in Rongo flourished under his leadership. He oversaw the building of numerous roads and bridges such as the Nyaburu, Ombasa, Kotawa, and Opapo, Mulo, Madiaba, and Kabuoro bridges, all of which opened up rural areas.
Well, if you're just joining us, that is the Requiem Mass for Dalmaso Otieno that is currently underway at the Don Bosco Church there in Upper Hill. I'm being informed by our very own reporter, that is Chumba, that family, friends, politicians as well are currently attending that particular Mass. And the person who you are listening to is Lillian Otieno, the daughter of the late Dalmas, who's currently reading the family eulogy. You do remember that he was a former Rongo Member of Parliament and a cabinet minister. He'll be laid to rest on October 2nd, 2025 at his rural home in Kangeso Village, Migori County. The family initially announced that, and of course they were speaking earlier on at the Lee Funeral Home in Nairobi County, where his body was being preserved by relatives and leaders. Described Otieno as a statesman who devoted his life to public service. Several Migori leaders who accompanied the family praised him for his vision and contribution to national leadership. Remember that Otieno died on September 7th, 2025 at his Nairobi residence. He was aged 80 years, and of course we'll be following on that particular Requiem Mass, and until he is laid to the ground on October 2nd, 2025. Our very own Chumba is following on that particular story. Also, another developments from the corridors of justice that we're keeping an eye on is that now the police recruitment exercise scheduled for this Friday will now go on as planned after the petitioners withdrew their petitions in totality this morning. Appearing before Judge Lawrence Mugambi, Sheria Mtani and others have informed the court that they have received over 20,000 calls and text messages urging them to abandon the petition to suspend the exercise. The calls and messages from the parents said it will not be in the best interest of their children for the petitioners to try and stop the exercise. They further cited, owing to the 2027 general election and the number that is already outside the country for other missions of police officers like the Haiti mission, the exercise will be in bad faith among other issues. And while giving his ruling, that is Justice Mugambi said, under the Constitution of Kenya, a petition can be withdrawn with the leave of the court, and of course stating that he has listened to the petition and the reasons given herein, and thus allows the withdrawal of the petitions dated 9th September 2025 and 11th August 2025 file that has been marked closed. If you're just joining us, there was a case challenging the recruitment of police exercise that was set to kick off on Friday. Now it will go on as planned after the petitioners withdrew their petition from the courts to hold this particular exercise. That means the National Police Service Commission, in conjunction with the National Police Service, will be carrying out this particular exercise of the recruitment of 10,000 constables to the service itself. And of course, if you're just joining us as well, our second hour, I had informed you earlier on, we'll be focusing on World Pharmacy Day that was marked on the 25th of September 2025, with the theme this year being Think Health Pharmacist. And of course, joining us this morning is none other than the president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya, Dr. Weri Mbogo. Dr. Weri, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And maybe we start on that note, given that we are now in the 30th of September. So in terms of the day as Kenyans, did we mark it as pharmacists? And as well as, what are some of the issues were you able to note on that particular day?
So thank you so much for this forum. So my name, as you have heard, is Weri Mbogo, the first female president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya in 60 years. And the conversation that we were leading on that day was Think Health, Think Pharmacist. And one of the things that we have noted in terms of healthcare in Kenya and globally is that the pharmacist is the most accessible healthcare provider and the most underutilized healthcare provider in the healthcare chain. So on that day, we were now discussing with patients, doing a lot of activities. If you follow our pages at the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya, you will notice that all over the country, there were activities that were marking that day on the 25th of September, educating patients, community engagement, and just making sure that the public is safe when it comes to medication use. Yes.
And when you say underutilized, because we know the critical role that pharmacists play across the country.
Yes.
Because you see, when the doctor writes you a prescription, you'll be the first person I'll go to. So in terms of saying underutilized, what do you mean by that?
So in Kenya, we have two cadres in the pharmacy profession. So we have the pharmacist, who is a bachelor degrees holder in pharmacy. So they train for 5 years, do an internship, and then now they're the doctories. So I'm a pharmacist by that nature. And then there's the diploma holder, who is a diploma holder in pharmacy, just like we have a diploma holder in engineering and all other courses. So they do 3 years and an attachment training, and then they get an enrollment certificate. So within that aspect, we have not really identified what you call the scope of practice of both cadres. So what you find as the most available person in a pharmacy, as you have explained, is usually a pharmaceutical technologist who is a diploma holder. But we are working to make sure that the pharmacist is more available to the public, and we can discuss more as to why, how, and how we are making sure that that happens.
You can tell us how. And
yes, but just as a nutshell, we now have Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya is the umbrella body of 5,000 pharmacies. So we are over 5,400 pharmacists in Kenya. And unfortunately, about 2,000 of those are jobless. And what we are saying is that in this country, we are having a deployment issue where we are not having as many pharmacists absorbed into the healthcare system in the counties and in areas where they should be working in order to make sure that their services are available to the public. Nevertheless, we have the pharmacists who are in the major hospitals. We have pharmacists across all the chains across the country, and they're offering their services, whether it is at, supply chain level, whether it is at the patient-facing level, or in the back end when it comes to now the distribution, manufacture of medicines. Yes, and we don't have enough pharmacists working as yet. We have not reached the ratios that WHO recommends for pharmacists in Kenya. Yes.
So what's the ratio that WHO has recommended?
So the WHO ratio is that for every 10,000 Kenyans, there should be one pharmacist. Yes.
So
if we are calculating our population at 50 million, I believe that we should be at a number of about 100,000 pharmacists in Kenya, but we are training at around 5,000, which means we should have everyone absorbed into our system to make sure that the care of the patient is built on what the Constitution demands, which section 43(1)A is our vision and our anchoring as the Pharmaceutical Society, that every Kenyan has the right to the highest attainable standard of healthcare. So for pharmaceutical care, we are saying that the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya is the home of all these experts who can assure Kenyans of the highest attainable standard of care, and also in line now with the government objectives of achieving the universal healthcare coverage aspect. The PSK, or the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya, is aligned to that goal and ensuring that the public has access to that highest standard. Yes.
And of course, given that you clearly stated that the ratio does not match what WHO has recommended, what are the implications of that in our country, especially for our health system?
Yes. So some of the implications are grave because sadly most errors or most problems when it comes to medications are realized down the line. So for example, if we are not rationalizing medication from a patient perspective of a patient especially who is on chronic care, we get to realize that later they develop complications that are not good. So we are getting them to, to kidney failure earlier than we should. We are having patients who are on too many medications. And also what we are working on with the Pharmaceutical Society is a mechanism as to how to minimize this medication and rationalization aspects so that the quality of life of this patient is improved. So how we are doing that is that, number one, we are working in a multidisciplinary team aspect. So if you go to most hospitals now, despite the few numbers, you'll find that in the wards, that they're working with, you'll find that the doctor will work with a pharmacist, and they'll work with other healthcare providers to make sure that the rationalization of the treatment of this patient is actually done in a better way. So when it comes to now the actual prescription handling, you're finding that there's a lot of collaboration between the pharmacist and the healthcare provider and the patient as well, to understand what is the doctor trying to achieve, what is the patient trying to achieve, and how do we achieve this in the fastest, safest, and most effective way. So there's a lot of thinking that goes behind the scenes in terms of making sure that when we receive a prescription, that we are able to rationalize all that. And that's why even at the retail setting, most of the times when they visit a pharmacy with a pharmacist, if they receive a prescription, there are more questions asked. If they go for a diagnosis, you'll find that there are more questions asked, because pharmacists are more than, you know, taking a prescription and reading it. We actually, the first 2 years, we trained together with our colleagues, the medical doctors and the dentists. So then we go into now more details when it comes to the medicine, and they go into, you know, surgical and other areas. But the basis is that we have the ability to make, you know, some diagnosis and also refer where we feel that a patient needs now further treatment. Yes.
And of course, you have just mentioned one of the issues that I wanted to ask in terms of us consuming so many antibiotics, because you see, when you have headache, we'll go for antibiotics. Whenever you have any general pain within your body, you're going for antibiotics. What are the adverse effects of such things?
So the first thing I'm telling Kenyans today, please listen to your healthcare providers. Let's not self-prescribe, especially when it comes to antibiotics, when it comes to medicines that cause other long-term effects. Antimicrobial resistance is actually a global problem right now. And we are working very hard with other bodies and also with other healthcare providers to make sure that, number one, there's a knowledge capacity, so that in terms of educating our patients and our people, that there is an aspect of we are making them aware that they should not use antibiotics without the rational aspects of it. I hope the English is a bit, it's not too heavy.
It's not too heavy.
Then that we are within the policy space, making sure that we are engaging with policy makers to make sure that the rules behind the use of certain medications is actually regulated. We have to be innovative in our approaches. We are now encouraging our people on the ground to make sure that patients are finishing their doses. So have an innovative way of making sure that we are recording how much we are giving away, and also that we are monitoring to make sure that that people are able to finish their doses of antibiotics when they need them, and also collaborating with the various players in the field to make sure that this problem is actually resolved. Because the sad thing that people don't understand, when we don't use antibiotics well, when we really need them, they don't work. When we really need them, like in the ICU or in other critical areas, they just refuse to work. So that now causes other effects, and we want to prevent that from happening. So that's why AMR becomes a very huge aspect in terms of making sure that the public remains safe with regards to antimicrobial or antibiotic use. Yes.
And do you feel as pharmacists that you play a critical role within the public health service?
Yes, we do. And even we reject a lot of prescriptions with antibiotics. So when we reject, don't go demanding for another one, because sometimes your symptoms or whatever you're suffering from, your body can self-manage. And as we manage the symptoms. So sometimes it's good to give time. If it's not necessary, it's good to give time for your body to deal with whatever is happening. And then now we make sure that now at the end of the day that we're saving you from irrational antimicrobial use. In addition to that, we are doing a lot of education in terms of the public. Like now, this is now the education component where we are telling the public, question a little bit more on the use of antibiotics, and also finish your dose when it's prescribed to you. Yes.
Is there a difference between original and generic medicines?
I would say the difference is in the, number one, when it came out or who developed it, and then the generic medicine now comes in later. But when registering, there's something that that is called bioequivalence. So bioequivalence is where we check that this original and the generic are working the same. So there are tests that countries do before you actually release that medicine to prove that this medicine is safe, it's working in the same manner, and it can be used for a certain condition to make sure that it's working. So generics are usable and they are more affordable than usually than the originals. But because many organizations or many companies are focused on the access component of making sure, especially for our region, for our markets in Africa, that medicines are more accessible now to patients, the price is now coming down to meet the, would say, quote unquote, the affordability of the population and not necessarily the affordability of the other medicine. Yes.
And of course, in terms of these particular drugs, do we invent them as well here in the country? And if not, if yes, tell us about it. If not, what can be done to take us there?
So one of the things that is very critical is that every region has its niche. So in Kenya, we mainly manufacture. We have actually a very vibrant local manufacturing sector, a very underutilized local manufacturing sector. And I would say underutilized because we should be manufacturing at 100% of our capacity, but I believe we're using only about 60%. And there are challenges around, you know, the trade, economic aspects that hinder the manufacturing, but we mainly do generic manufacturing here. But in the process of drug development, even globally, we have a lot of Kenyan pharmacists and Kenyan scientists working in those organizations that are known to develop innovator products. So traditionally, this has mainly been happening in Europe and the US, and now we are seeing Asia and countries like Korea coming up with innovative therapies. And also Africa now, we are actually now thinking about, you know, vaccines in malaria and other areas that are quite innovative. So I would say we are not 100% there, but we are getting there. We have the brains to get us there. All we need is the support from an innovative perspective in terms of investments to make sure that, you know, research investment, to make sure that our people have areas where they can do the drug development aspects. And now utilizing also AI. AI is now a big thing in drug development, drug discovery, because AI has a lot to do with, you know, how does this medicine work with this particular system and how do you test it in terms of that. So we are now looking at areas of how do we incorporate AI in our studies to make sure that we are getting close to what the body needs in terms of the medicine, in terms of correcting the issues that the medicines are having. I'm sorry, that's a bit more complex,
no, it's okay.
But you can go back to the...
It's okay, because the reason why I asked you that question, we witnessed what happened during the COVID-19 era.
Yes.
We witnessed in these superpower countries, we were asking for vaccinations. Some got pissed because we had to make our own vaccination. So in terms of getting there, are we close?
So currently what I can say is that we are engaging different ministries from a manufacturing perspective. Number one, I know there has been engagements with the Ministry of Trade to make local manufacturing, number one, more accessible or more vibrant from a funding perspective and also from a trade perspective in terms of the probably subsidies or financing that would be used to manufacture so that our medicines are more competitive. I would be honest and say we are at 30%. 30% manufacturing, 70% imports. And we need now to move into sustainability, especially what we call our essential medicines list. We need to now move to a sustainability aspect where we are saying that let's move and see whether we can go reverse the order, where we're doing 70% manufacturing and 30% imports of our essential medicines. It's a journey. We'll get there, but we're not yet there. But the goal is sustainability, just like you have said, so that now we are not also liable to shocks. We call them global shocks. That's currencies, shortages, and many other aspects that would impact the security of our public and the medicines. Yes.
And given that earlier on you were talking about AI and how it has been significant, especially in this particular sector. So in terms of using technology within this particular sector, how has it changed the way you work as pharmacists?
So of course, now we have now more tools. I would say there are more tools to do comparisons. So for example, when a patient is on a lot of medication, so you can, before you had to use your memory to sort of figure it out, but now we are having tools that support, you know, the risks, that help you understand the risks around a particular prescription. As a Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya, we are collaborating. So at the Pharmaceutical Society, we talk about EPIC. So EPIC has to do with who we believe we are, because we believe we are EPIC as pharmacists. Then number 2, we are focusing on 4 pillars: education, policy, innovation, and collaboration. And we are working with partnerships with people who are in the technology space, the AI space, to even bridge the gap when it comes to the knowledge in terms of utilization of AI. So we have started the conversation on making sure that our pharmacists understand how to utilize AI and how to use it in decision-making processes, not just the way it is generically used, like your chat GPT or what am I going to eat tomorrow, you know, not in that way, but in more complex ways that enhance efficiency in terms of medication safety. So we're in the process of developing a curriculum actually for pharmacists in terms of making sure that our people are able to utilize what is before them to make more efficient decisions and develop better utilization of medicine in terms of AI use. Yeah.
And of course, the other main issue that in this particular sector we face as a country as a whole, you witness not once, not twice or thrice, we see KMPDC rolling out some drugs within various pharmacies across the country.
Yes.
So in terms of ensuring these illicit prescriptions of drugs do not reach the consumer at the end of the day, what measures have you put in place?
So actually you have highlighted one of the most important aspects where we need pharmacists along different sectors. So where you have mentioned has to do with supply chains. So from a policy perspective, we are now speaking a lot towards having what we call not just a supply chain, but a health supply chain, because a health supply chain looks at what we call forward and backward logistics. So we look at the medicine, how is it moving from the manufacturer to the point where it gets to the patient? And then now, when it gets there, how do we get it back if there's a problem? So when you see the Pharmacy and Poisons Board actually informing or saying we need to bring this medicine back, it means that the Pharmacy and Poisons Board or the regulators are doing a good job in terms of monitoring what is happening in the market. It means that when they notice, or when the manufacturer notices, because sometimes you may notice that something could have gone wrong when it's already in the market, that we're having good mechanisms to bring back the medicine on what we call a recall procedure. And this is done through what we call tracking. And I know the Pharmacy and Poisons Board is working really hard with, you know, importers, distributors, and everyone along the chain to make sure that this traceability is enhanced, so that now we even know to the level where we are calling you as the patient and telling you, please bring this back because we feel that it could have had an issue. But these cases are very few, they are very rare, but it is a risk mitigation measure that must be enhanced in any country or in any security, from a security perspective in terms of medicines flowing to and from. And I think even at this point it's important to talk about having pharmacists along this chain also helps with efficiency, where we are not having too many expiries. Because what we are realizing is that, number one, patients or the public are holding so many medicines in their homes. I'm sure even for you, there's somewhere you can think. So from even a safety risk, that's a risk that you're holding or public is holding in their homes. Secondly is how do we prevent expiries along our supply chains, both from a government perspective and a private sector perspective. Private sector is doing very well because they have managed to keep their percentage values at global levels of 2%. With the government, we are working. It's work in progress. We are working together to make sure that as long as they have the responsible people or the right people along their supply chain, then that problem should be reversed. So I'm sure the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya has engaged different parties to make sure that we are having a position on who should handle what aligned to global standards. Yes.
And of course, in terms of ensuring that even as the public, we can tell the difference between drugs. Let's say I've been taking amoxil all my life, and then I notice something different. So what should be those signs we'll be looking out for in terms of the original one from the fake one?
So I think now we would now go into the counterfeit aspect. First, the first way of not accessing counterfeits is by getting your medicines from a registered and a listed pharmaceutical provider. So that means that this person has a license. So when you walk into any pharmacy today, please check that there is a license. That's number one. Then number two, and by the way, if you ask them, you copy license, they'll show you. Then secondly is to check that the person who is serving you is actually a registered healthcare provider or a pharmacist or a pharmaceutical technologist. So that awareness sort of covers you from that aspect. Outside of that chain, we are working with the government to make sure that if there are any intelligence loopholes, that we are sealing them. But I know there are processes that are going on that we cannot discuss on this forum in terms of making sure that counterfeits are not making it to the hospital or to the right chains, and that they're being dealt with at the point at which they're entering the country. Yes.
And in terms of consumption of some of these medicines, because we know the human body is different, mine cannot consume the way yours consume. So in terms of between the strong and mild medicine, so how do you go about that, especially with the various patients that you receive?
So now that has to do with competence, and that's where now the differences between now the pharmacist and any other provider comes in, because there is what you call the therapeutic index of medicines. So a pharmacist is trained to understand the back end of that therapeutic index aspect, and that's why it's important to know who is this who's handling, especially if you're on chronic medication, who is this who's handling this aspect. So what we're doing as pharmacists, and it's something that we have started in many hospitals especially, we are getting patients going through what you call a medication therapy management program. So which means if you have diabetes, hypertension, that maybe every once in 3 months that you're sitting with a pharmacist, and they are, number one, explaining to you what this medication is doing. Number two, they are understanding which medicine is causing which side effect. And also number three, they are discussing now with your healthcare provider or your primary healthcare provider, who could be your specialist in diabetes, to make sure that whatever you're using, that we are rationalizing it, and we are discussing together to make sure that this patient is getting the best out of this care. Because what we are discovering is that the numbers are going up. In terms of complexity and healthcare, the numbers are going up. We are no longer at infection rate. We are now at a stage where we are having so many patients who have diabetes, hypertension, unfortunately even cancer, renal failure, and all these different doctors that this patient is seeing are not talking to each other. So the central part becomes now the pharmacist, who is able now to rationalize all the medications for you, even tell you simple things like, take this one in the morning, take this one in the evening, don't mix these two. It's not just a matter of, you have a prescription and, you're just issuing medicines. So it is a service that is coming into this region. You will start seeing it very soon. We are encouraging our members to start doing it. There are places where they're doing it, even on the bedside in the wards. So it's something that has already started to make sure that safety aspect that we're discussing is good. But nevertheless, the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, if you're experiencing any adverse event or a side effect, so if you go to the Pharmacy and Poisons Board website, ppb. It's just say Pharmacy and Poisons Board Kenya, you can report an adverse event, a side effect or an adverse event. This data is important because it helps us know which medicines are actually working and which ones are harming our population. So it's not like you're reporting so that unashtaki mtu. Sometimes if it needs to be acted upon, like now a recall or a punitive measure, it will happen based on what happens to that medication. But now usually what that data is used for, it's used to compare between populations. How is this medicine actually working for our population in Kenya? So that's why now the pharmacist becomes a very central point in terms of healthcare.
You've just mentioned some of the health issues we're facing as a country. You've talked about diabetes, you've talked about cancer, but in terms of a disease that has overwhelmed your sector, what is it and how can it be addressed?
By the way, I would say non-communicable diseases or lifestyle-related diseases are becoming a problem in this country. It has a lot to do with our lifestyle. If you look, we are exercising less, cooking less, which I don't know why we are doing that. We are cooking less in our homes. We are eating a lot of fast food or preferring fast food as our main meals. So if you look at what even the government, aligning with what the government is trying to do, there's what they call primary health care, and preventative care is part of primary health care. So now, if you look at now where the pharmacist is coming in, number one, we are involved in that aspect of primary health care. And please know that the government signed a declaration some years back that they're going to make primary health care a priority in this country. So now with that aspect, the pharmacist is actively involved in terms of lifestyle shaping of patients. People ask us, where do you do these things? We do them on the ground within our pharmacies. And sadly, community pharmacies would say are less than 10% of the total pharmacy population. But where they are there is that service that is offered, medication therapy and also lifestyle management. Because we can see where things are heading. We are getting a lot of young people who are getting diabetes, hypertension, and cancer is becoming a big problem in this country. So these main diseases, especially the three, diabetes, hypertension, and various forms of cancer, are the problems that we're starting to see more and more within our population and in terms of managing the populations. In terms of infectious diseases, we're not doing too badly because we are discouraging, the discouraging of the use of antibiotics early is helping us manage now conditions. COVID also helped our behaviors in terms of washing hands and all that. So that aspect is now being overtaken by non-communicable diseases. Of course, malaria remains a problem. HIV, AIDS, TB are still priority areas for our population in terms of managing. Yes.
And in terms of aiding the government, the government wants to ensure that there is universal health coverage. So in terms of the role of pharmacists, where are you better placed in ensuring that this goal is achieved?
So when we look at the universal health coverage goals of the government, so we focus on three things. The government looks at access. So access is how accessible are pharmacists, and we are encouraging county governments that imagine we have pharmacists ready to go to even marginalized areas in this country. So just put out the job ads and you will see the difference that a pharmacist will make for your population, especially in managing the non-communicable diseases. So that is in terms of accessibility of the pharmacist and also accessibility of medicine. So we are working very hard to make sure that we have more accessible medicines in our country, and also within the government we're working with them to make sure that they have more medicines within their supply chain, that the number of medicines that they're having within the government supply chain are accessible, and there are more. Then the second part that we talk about with universal healthcare coverage is affordability. So affordability has to do with what you can see the government is trying to do with universal, with payment aspects of SHA and SHI. For us, it's more of the medicines that are available in the market, available and affordable to the patient. Then the third component is quality. Quality is where right now from a policy perspective there's a quality bill that is actually going into Parliament. We have given in our comments and our position in terms of what licensing and scope. When we say scope, we say what should the different people handle when it comes to the pharmaceutical aspects. Now, in terms of service delivery and quality from a medicine perspective, where we are working, where the Pharmacy and Poisons Board is working very hard to attain what we call WHO ML3 status. So WHO ML3 is now upgrading us as a country from a regulatory perspective or a control of medicines perspective, that we are a country that is considered safe, or our controls in terms of how we manage our medicines and the challenges that you're talking about, they are being done in a way that is comparable to countries that are of a safe nature. The advantage to achieving this status, it means that the medicines that we will work very hard to manufacture locally are exportable to more competitive markets, because right now our medicines cannot be consumed by certain markets, or they are not the appeal to actually picking those medicines by those markets is not there because of that ML3 status. Yes.
And of course, the other main issue, before I ask you my second question, there's a viewer who is inquiring in terms of SHA coverage.
Yes.
When you leave the hospital and you've written that particular subscription, does SHA work in those pharmacies?
So there's what we are calling, number one, the pharmacy benefits program. So that is something that we are still working with with the Ministry of Health to make sure that, number one, the medicines that are getting into the SHA system are affordable, accessible, and their quality within that UHC goal. Number two, right now, the government, in terms of SHA, you are only limited to a certain cost aspect that has been allocated to a certain treatment option. So if you're within that cost aspect, unfortunately, the medication that you will get will be within that cost framework, right? And that's why we're encouraging the government to have more medicines that they're stocking within their supply chain, as we're working from what they're stocking and who is managing what they're stocking. Have a more efficient system within that chain, so that now patients are able now to get medicines within that channel, and they don't have to now go out and buy medicines. Because one thing that people need to remember is that the person selling the medicine buys it from somewhere, and they have to pay the person where the medicine came from. So it means that even you have to pay for this medicine so that this person can pay for that medicine. But I know our distributors are also having some challenges around, that framework, which we are actively engaging the government to make sure that the chain is open, because if you don't pay the distributor for their medication, then the distributor will not supply that medication to the center. Then it's a backward spiral of who is funding that medicine that the patient needs to receive. Yes.
Now, my other question is that these risks are associated with over-the-counter medication, particularly for older adults. What are we risking from this particular over-the-counter medication?
So currently, we have a unique setup in Kenya, and I'll keep saying this. So we have a unique setup in Kenya where all cadres practice the same way when it comes to the pharmaceutical environment. So in other countries, where you have a different personnel practicing the pharmacy, or what you call pharmacy today, they have categorized the medicines. So you categorize the medicines based on the risk profile. So you have over-the-counter, then you have what you call the pharmacy-only medicines, then you have what you call prescription medicines, and also note that pharmacists can prescribe medicines within certain limits, and then now you have the controlled medicines. In many of the countries where there are different people on the counter giving medicines, you can see that they have a list which they can stock and actually dispense. So that is a control that we are looking to also have in this country to ensure now safety of the public. Nevertheless, we are now encouraging that areas where they sell over-the-counter medicines, please have a healthcare professional, a pharmacist or a pharmaceutical technologist in that area, including our supermarkets. Because now we have sections in supermarkets that are becoming a risk factor, where we may need to start putting in a few measures to make sure that patients even can refer. They can ask somebody, how do I use this, or how many should I use? Because that picking of just any medicine from anywhere without referencing can be a problem. Yes.
And of course, given that we're coming to the end of our show, in your final remarks, I want you to talk to the young pharmacists who are out there.
Yes.
Given that you clearly stated that 5,000 of you are currently in this particular sector, 2,000 of them don't have formal employment.
Yes.
So in terms of, is there opportunity in this sector?
So to my, let me call them because they are mine, to my young pharmacists. The Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya is very committed. They are very committed to making sure that our practice in Kenya is aligned to, number one, best practices, and number two, global standards that allow the pharmacists to actually practice in the areas. Secondly, we are working very hard to make sure that we are going to have programs that allow you to practice in the most epic manner, because there are things that we learn in school, and then now we go out there. Just like every career, you have to gain what you call hard and soft skills that allow you to operate in the environment that you are in. So we are engaging from a policy perspective all quarters, from the governors who should be employing these young pharmacists. Utilize them in your primary healthcare aspects, and you will see a difference in terms of how the public is managed within the counties and in the mashinani. But other than that is that we are not giving up. We are going to make sure that the constitutional right to the highest attainable standard of care for the Kenyan patient is achieved. Yes.
Thank you so much. That is the president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya, Dr. Requiem. Thank you for making time for us. And of course, there you have it. I'm sure you've gotten at least useful bits, but you've been told not to just go to a pharmacy and ask for any medicine. First of all, pass through the doctor until you're prescribed. With whatever ailment that you're currently suffering from, it will be addressed at the pharmacy point. And of course, in terms of the attainance of the universal health coverage, Dr. has also talked about the role that the pharmacists play in achieving this particular role from the government to achieve this particular goal of universal health coverage. That concludes our topics this morning. I need to pave way for Kurunzi Mashinani, but we're keeping an eye on various stories that are currently making headlines at this hour. My name is Abdiaziz Hashim. The sign language interpreter at the bottom end of the screen is Caroline Joroge. Good morning for now.
Although developers are experimenting with search features that include current events, they're only available to paid subscribers. And don't forget, every answer provided by ChatGPT needs to be fact-checked. And students especially should take note. Universities are currently debating if and how AI tools like ChatGPT should be used in the future, and how that might change our understanding of authorship. Completely banning AI tools is probably not going to work, though.
The best solution is not to ban AI technologies, but instead to determine with students the most effective methods to create high-quality texts. And that doesn't simply mean letting AI write the text. Instead, students could work with the AI to develop several iterations of a text and then flesh out their own argument with the help of this AI tool.
Artificial intelligence is basically like a giant toolbox. If you know how the tools work and which to use to fix a specific problem, it can be really useful. At Deutsche Welle, we do not currently publish any journalistic work produced from generative AI, but DW is looking for ways to responsibly harness the potential of so-called large language models.
When it comes to comment moderation on social media, can ChatGPT help write a program that generates replies or filters out offensive or discriminatory comments? We turn to the chatbot to try and do just that.
I can say, I have no idea of coding, for example, which is what we did, and it will reply, okay, let's help you with that.
And it worked. In no time, one team had managed to create a prototype with the help of ChatGPT.
I'm a journalist, right? I'm not a coder, but I can do these things because I get help with AI, and it's just expanding your capabilities.
The journalists give directions as to what the program should do, and the AI bot writes the code.
I asked for a code, it gave me a code, but I had no idea how the code works. It's just numbers and like no digits to me, some alphabets to me, but I don't know how it produced, what's the idea behind the code, all these things. So I don't really imagine it to be a teacher, but definitely I'm very sure it will help you.
Benjamin Paassen cautions against viewing AI tools as independent and autonomous.
I don't think of AI tools as their equals. AIs aren't conscious human beings. They're tools that can support us in our work. And I believe teamwork between humans and AI supporting educational technology, these AI tools, can be more effective and produce a higher quality output than either humans or AI tools on their own.
But there's more to digital learning than AI. So-called edutainment apps are fun but also informative. Loveland, for example, is used for sex education. Questions on this topic aren't always easy to ask, and answers from the internet aren't necessarily correct.
These students in Cape Town have a special assignment today. They're testing out the edutainment game Loveland.
We need young people to help us to create the game and give us critical feedback and say, oh, this is really boring. Oh, and this is really cool.
The game deals with a difficult topic amongst teenagers, sex education, without the stigma or the shame. In the game, users need to complete levels on different islands that each stand for an issue of their own, like contraception or mental health. 14-year-old Sibulele and her friends have already tested the app.
The thing that I like about the app, it is not offensive. It is you learn, but you're also playing at the same time.
The game doesn't only focus on sex, because it also focuses on boosting people's laws, boosting people's self-esteem.
Karen Stierlin has tested the app in many countries. She realised that teenagers around the world usually have the same questions, and they often trust misinformation from the internet.
I experienced them very interested and very eager to learn, but you need to give them the space, a safe space. So that's what we try to make with Loveland, with only proper and age-appropriate information. The long-term consequences of lack of sexual education are often very hard and kicks them out of economy and social life.
Sibulele agrees that there's a lack of proper sex education in her community.
In South Africa, it's rare for a parent to teach you about sex